I love circular and double pointed needles, and sometimes I think people forget how many different ways they can be used. So this is just one example. On this project I'm just coming to the edge of my border and I want to bind it off after the next round. But I want to bind it off on larger needles than I'm currently using. I want to bind the stitches off after they've already been worked, not with fresh yarn. It's easier to bind them off this way on double knitting, and it usually gives just the right edge length, but I know I need to go up one needle size just to be sure I don't get a tight edge. But rather than going and getting another circular needle, which I may or may not have to hand, what I'm going to do is work a few stitches on a double pointed needle, a rigid one, and do remember that circulars are just giant floppy double points. I'm going to work this round just onto that single double pointed needle. So this is double layer knitting. So I'm knitting my front layer, and I have alternatively mounted purl stitches. So I'm knitting my front layer stitches, keeping the front layer yarn out of the way whilst I do my back layer. Whoops, I'm alternatively purling. So I'm working just as usual on my double pointed needle, but it's one size larger than the needle I'm currently using. I've now double knit in pattern an extra row on these section of stitches. Generally I'd carry on until I entirely filled the double pointed needle, and now I can slip the stitches to the opposite end of the needle, take my crochet hook and begin my bind off. I've decided here to leave my stitches the way they're currently set on the needle, even though the purls are unconventional. As long as I'm consistent all the way round, then it's going to make a neat and attractive edge. So I'm just binding off using my crochet hook in place of my right hand needle, slipping it into a stitch, hooking it through, slipping it in, hooking it through, and there is the attractive bound off edge. I've bound off nearly all the stitches on the double pointed needle, and I should really call it a rigid double pointed needle, and I've popped the last stitch back on the end of that needle, and now I can go back to working my stitches in double knitting. I'll fill the needle again, slip the needle to the opposite end and continue my bind off, and there's the bound off edge. So I've changed the needle size, but all I needed was one rigid double pointed needle. There are loads more ways to use both circulars and double pointed needles slightly unconventionally to make your life a lot easier. I hope to add those to my YouTube channel as time goes by. Thanks for joining me. Happy stitches!